Just a heads up, I don't curse, so I'll always replace the curse word with something else.
Kamino's Word by Tunafishprincess. Read by Ella Flowerdet. Chapter 5. Summary. All Might Ch5 Izuku, mentally noting some things he hadn't seen earlier. The detective comes around to assist, but neither of the men are prepared for what happens during the interview. His followers tried to reason with him. Rekka Todoroki, one of the captain's most trusted members, published a collection of his writings during this period, a recollection of discrimination and hope, wherein a letter sent to the captain on March 21st, 3 days before the Great Panic in Tokyo. To summarize, he stated that it was too dangerous for the captain to meet with the meta users in that area. What they needed, he argued, was to let the Tokyo meta users fend for themselves while they reorganized back in Yokohama. Captain Kamino's response was sharp. I see people in need and a way to use my power for their sake. In a world looking less and less human, who will stand up for the meta users? Shigaraki H. The Rise of the Meta Powers in the 21st Century. Kamino Quarterly, Vol. 40, Number 2, 2000, pages 50 to 52. Yagi spent the last few decades merely punching villains and saving people from burning buildings. Hero work involved more than what most people would expect. His friendship with Detective Tsukachi helped him hone that part of himself even further. While he was no officer of the law, he knew more than most pros about gaining information. Take reading people, for example. Everyone had little tells. For some, it was in their voice, but for the majority of people, it was in the eyes. A psychological drawback to when their ancestors needed to seek the nearest possible escape route, be it from foe or some dangerous animal. Blinking, looking in a certain direction, how long one might close their eyes. Yagi knew them all. He had seen it on villains and civilians alike. Young Midoriya was no exception. Discomfort lined his red-rimmed gaze, eyes constantly shifting about from the door and window in the private hospital room, as if to map his best exits should things go south. His grey hair initially made Yagi think the boy was older until he got a full look at the large eyes and baby fat clinging to his cheeks. A wave of concern flooded through him at the sight. Young, very young, probably not even a high schooler yet. Did his parents know about what happened? A somber thought ran through his mind. Did the boy even have parents? The child's digits fidgeted, curling around the corners of his shield. Though the paint was chipped, the metal below shined like an oil spill. Little bits of color flickered off the silver metal beneath the artificial lighting. For a replica, it was quite beautiful. His eyes lit up at the sight. How nostalgic. Yagi used to have one of his own as a child, albeit much smaller and made of plastic. His lips pulled up in amusement as the boy continued to hold onto the cosplay item like a child with a teddy bear. It packed a punch, bruising his cheek from where the boy used it. Must be one of the expensive versions. A darker voice in his mind whispered something else, however. If something like that were able to hurt him, then his powers must be weakening faster than he thought. Or perhaps not. He was still able to keep up his transformation and could probably do so for a few more hours. A feeling of intuition was tugging at his gut, a familiar friend since he started heroics. Yes, despite his happy face, his insides were another story altogether. His gut feeling was rarely wrong. Many villains had been stopped due to this sixth sense of his. Not that the boy was villain, but everything about the teen was off somehow. Yagi wasn't sure how to describe it. Young Midoriya seemed out of place, even in the hospital bed. Yagi at first chalked it up to the boy's odd accent. It reminded him of how his great-grandmother used to speak, a lyrical sort of Japanese he heard more commonly in the countryside, but not quite. It was hearing an old movie come to life. A few seconds later, he adjusted his posture, leaning against the wall so as to put less pressure on his side. It helped alleviate the pain, if only for a moment. Transforming into his all-might appearance, had steadily declined in time since his fight with his jaw clenched. No, he wouldn't dwell on that now. Not when this boy needed him. He focused his attention back to the child. Perhaps it was the mystery of it all. A top-level pro hero taken out by a seemingly innocent, if rather confused young man, was no laughing matter. The teen's moves spoke of military or martial arts training, though his body did not seem to match. He was thin and lean in ways that made Yagi anxious, hands itching to get the poor kid something to eat. It didn't deter from the evidence of young Midoriya's musculature, however. The boy could kill a man with his bare hands if need be, especially if he had an enhancement quirk. His gaze drifted to the window as his thoughts took a darker turn. Though the sky was blue, it felt as if the room had grown darker and colder. There were rumors, unconfirmed of course, but still, hushed whispers between a few fellow heroes that the Commission had been taking children in and training them up into high positions of heroics. Not that any of them had much room to judge. Hero schools started training at the age of 15 or 16, after all. But he was getting off topic. There were 1,000,001 questions in Yagi's mind, all equally important. First things first, however, the kid needed something to eat. When he inquired what the boy would be like, he received a ducked head, cheeks blossoming into a vivid red as the teen sputtered. "Are you sure?" "Not to worry, young man. What would you like me to get you? You look like you haven't eaten in days." He laughed heartily. The boy cast his eyes at the floor with an air of melancholy as he mumbled, "More like centuries." Yagi blinked. "That was an interesting expression." "Pardon?" "Ah," he waved his hands frantically. "You're right. Food would be nice, though you really don't have to." The boy's growling stomach begged to differ. Young Midoriya covered his face. The small knot of suspicion in his stomach began to ease, if only slightly. For someone who defeated Endeavor, the child was surprisingly shy and awkward. He wouldn't have thought they were the same person had he not watched the video of the fight. "Nonsense!" He thrust his fist into his chest, grin stretching even wider. "I am here for you, young Midoriya. Whatever you need." Whatever he needed indeed. The request was for quite a lot of food. Yagi would later think on his way to the nearest fast food franchise, but perhaps he was merely understanding the portions a growing young man could eat. Still, 10 hamburgers, 3 fries, and the milkshake did seem like a lot. But no matter. He could give away the rest if needs be. The trip to and around took longer than expected. His friend already there when he returned. He waved at Detective Tsukachi from a distance, the younger male standing idly by the hospital's entrance. It took Yagi a moment to gain the man's attention, possibly due to his civilian gear, but more likely because of his current physical appearance. "Detective," he called out, adjusting his hold on the bags of food in his arms. "I wasn't expecting you to get here so quickly." His old friend almost reached out, but pulled away, much to Yagi's relief. Out of all the things he hated to be seen as, an invalid was near the top of the list. The awkwardness passed soon enough, Tsukachi falling into step with him as they entered. "I was in the area," the shorter man mentioned offhandedly, though they both knew that wasn't true. The sweat on his brow told Yagi all he needed to know. "I can't say I'm surprised you were the one who found him." His lips turned up fondly. "You've always had a knack of finding people." Yagi shrugged. "All I did was ask around." It's amazing how far he got with the burns on his feet. His brows furrowed slightly at the state he'd found the kid in. Young Midoriya had obviously been through a lot today. Despite his meek demeanor, there was a guarded vulnerability behind the teen's face. He had seen that expression several times before with trauma victims. Nonetheless, this could all be conjecture. Yagi wasn't a professional psychologist after all. Probably some augmentation, Kirk, Tsukachi summarized. You got a name yet? Izuku Midoriya. And before you ask, I already checked with the quirk registry. There's nothing on him. Yagi stated, shoulders slumping. He suspected that there would be anything in the boy's spirit records either. It was as if the teen had merely popped into existence. Tsukachi sighed. A false name then. Not necessary, Yagi said after a pause, the tightening returning once more to his chest. That's why I ask you to come. You can get to the truth of the matter. And I wanted to keep things discreet. You're the symbol of peace. Tsukachi released a small chuckle, taking off his hat to run a hand through his dark hair. Nothing you do is discreet. I'm surprised the media hasn't been tipped off to your location yet. It was Yagi's turn to laugh. He lifted a finger to his lips, replying, I have my ways, detective. You'll find many hospitals respect the privacy of who comes through their doors, unless there's a warrant. There was another reason he'd chosen this particular hospital as well, but he didn't feel the need to vocalize it to the man. The detective already knew about One for All and his true form. It wouldn't take him long to connect the dots. The detective folded his hands together, expression taking a darker turn. Speaking of warrants, the boy has one outstanding already. His gaze flickered upwards to Yagi's. Any reason why you didn't just relinquish him to the Yokohama's authorities instead of pulling one from Tokyo? This isn't like you. Rescuing crazed vigilantes and bringing them junk food isn't your style. A deep wrecked breath escaped his lips. He had hoped the man wouldn't ask that, but he supposed it was inevitable. Yagi's hands tightened around the backs, the hamburger grease beginning to coat his fingers and shirt. I'll admit, he began. When I first received the report, I was going to. His mouth drew into a thin, determined line. But, Tsukachi added, dark eyes widening ever so slightly. Something changed. When I saw him, I didn't see that. Even after he hit me with his shield. He explained. His cheek dropped at the reminder. They began to slow as they approached the boy's door. A hand rested against his shoulder. He looked down at the detective. A calm, collected gaze greeted him. What did you see then? Yagi closed his eyes. The image of young Midoriya's tearful face was no different than the countless others he had encountered in his decades as the symbol of peace. I saw a scared child. The detective gave a thoughtful hum. A scared child who took out the number 2 hero of Japan. Tsukachi recalled, scratching his chin. Something about this doesn't add up. You're right, Yagi remarked, flexing his muscles once more to resume his large form. I am confident that with your help, we'll be able to get to the bottom of this. He grabbed the handle, eyeing the teen through the door's small window. The boy startled at his appearance, but waved back, a small smile on his lips. Yagi mirrored the look. His friend nodded, a look of determination across his features. After you, then. Tsukachi scanned the interior. Nothing out of the ordinary. The hospital room was an off-white shade, fitted with basic medical instruments and a small chair for visitors. Afternoon sunlight filtered through the shades, bathing the room in a mixture of colors. He hung his hat and coat on a simple rack near the door before approaching the room's youngest occupant. All Might set the bag of greasy food on a table nearby, handing the teen not 1, not 2, but 10 hamburgers and a tall shake. Tsukachi wished he were kidding. Equally surprising was how quickly the kid put away the food. Within minutes, all that was left was a small mountain of wrappers and a seated Izuku Midoriya. He cleaned up the area with the symbol of peace until his bedside was empty of trash. Tsukachi couldn't help noticing the boy's almost military efficiency. Who was this kid? Only one way to find out, he thought. The detective stepped forward. Good afternoon, he introduced himself pleasantly. My name is Naomasa Tsukachi. All Might invited me here. And you are? He already knew the boy's name, but it didn't hurt to begin with something simple between them. He wanted to build up some trust, at least. Two green eyes looked up from beneath a mass of pale curls. The boy All Might spoke of was rather plain looking. Nice, but nothing that made him stand out against the crowd. In fact, he looked more like some average middle school student than the fearsome vigilante the press had been playing up for the country. Izuku Midoriya, sir, the teen stammered. A familiar warm buzz in Tsukachi's mind alerted him to the statement's truth. Interesting. You're very polite, he replied, a small smile emerging. I appreciate that. If it's alright with you, I'd like you to answer a few questions. Midoriya's fingers played against the large shield, drumming along the rim nervously. Is it okay if I ask some myself? Of course, He looked up. "You're with the police, right?" Tsukachi blinked, trying to keep his face neutral. "Yes. How did you know?" "The way you carry yourself," he mumbled before his eyes flickered over to the rack. "And I saw a glimpse of your badge when you took off your jacket." "You're very astute, Mr. Midoriya," he remarked, slightly impressed. The young teen blushed, face bright red, as he motioned his hands about in front of him. "Oh no, not really." His index scratched at his cheek bashfully. "I just like to analyze things." "Don't sell yourself short. If you train skills like that, you would make a fine policeman." Tsukachi inwardly remarked the immediate change in demeanor. The flinch and paling features told him that the remark might not have come off as he intended. Midoriya gave a weak smile, changing the conversation in the same leap. "This is Kamino Ward, right?" "Correct. We're currently in Sanyuku Hospital." "Do you know where that is?" "No," he admitted sheepishly. "Things have changed a lot since I was here before." "That's okay." The shadow behind him wavered. Tsukachi peered up. "All might, would you like to sit down?" "You're looming over me." The symbol of peace covered his embarrassment with a hearty laugh. "Ah, yes. Haha. Pardon me." Tsukachi struggled not to snort as the large man settled into the smallest chair near the bedside, almost too big to fit into it. The seat creaked, but held, a testament to its strength. Rolling his shoulders, he moved on to the next question. "How old are you, Midoriya?" There was a short pause. The teen's features clouded as if thinking on the answer, which struck Tsukachi as odd. It didn't last long, however, as Midoriya soon answered. Biologically, 15. The answer was truthful, but the delivery struck the detective as odd, if not outright suspicious. Biologically, but chronologically? Did that mean he was older than he actually was? Or was this merely another illustration of Midoriya's nervous speaking pattern? Tsukachi's eyes narrowed. His gut told him it was the former, but he didn't want to push the team. "You're quite young," he commented. His gaze sharpened as he switched to the main issue at hand. "Could you replay the events that happened to you?" Midoriya bit down on his bottom lip before asking. "Will this be off or on the record?" "Why do you ask?" "I don't." The boy's jaw tightened, hand curling around the sides of the shield. "I'm afraid of this information getting out. Sorry. And I haven't had the best time with the police in my time. Tsukachi felt for the kid. I'm sorry to hear that. The Quirk Regulation Act requires me to report on illegal quirk usage, however. The teen's brows furrowed. Illegal quirk usage? You used what we assume was an augmentation quirk against several police officers and one professional hero. Tsukachi recounted. Professional hero? He shook his head before signing. Now I'm even more confused. You don't know what a professional hero is? Tsukachi and All Might shared a concerned look. Had something given the boy brain damage? Did he need to call the doctor back in? No. Is this like the comics? He turned to the man in the chair, eyes wide. Wait, are you a professional hero too, Mr. All Might? The man in question flashed his trademark smile. I am indeed. Tsukachi could almost see the stars in Midoriya's eyes. Oh my gosh, that's so cool! How did you come to be a hero? The boy continued to rattle off question after question without waiting for a response. You said it was professional, so does that mean it's a regulated position? Is it salary based or hourly based? What kinds of things do heroes do here? Are there specializations for heroes like in other jobs? How similar are they to the comics? Are you like Avengers or more like the Justice League? What's the most popular superhero team in Japan? How many heroes are there in Japan? Is there... Whoa there, young Midoriya. All Might chuckled, patting the boy's shoulder. Calm down. That's quite a lot of questions. Sorry, it just... He scratched the back of his head, eyes wistful. It's kind of exciting, you know? His attention drifted to the window. A bittersweet mask passed over his features before fading into a more natural look. My uncle would have loved to meet you. He's the one who introduced me to comics. Sorry for getting off track. Tsukachi nodded, taking the familial relation into account in his mind. The words he'd used were past tense. Did his uncle die, perhaps? Whilst thinking over the new information, he continued on in a light-hearted manner. It's no problem at all. Why don't you start off how you got into the fight with Endeavor? Midoriya brought his index and thumb beneath his bottom lip, the fingers twitching as he spoke. Well, it's sort of weird. I mean, I was doing one thing, and the next moment I woke up in an ambulance. Except it wasn't a real ambulance. The people were all dressed in black, and they started freaking out when I started waking up. He released a nervous laugh. I might have overreacted. I hope they're not too injured. The detective hummed, noting the warm buzz of truth in his statements, though the vague information did unsettle him slightly. Ultimately, he came to the consolation that the boy was hiding something, but he was being mostly truthful. I'll be sure to investigate. What happened next? I escaped the ambulance and ended up in the middle of the street. He released a soft sigh, shoulders slumping forward. It was all really overwhelming. Overwhelming? How do you mean? All Might inquired. Well, I thought I was back home again, but everything was different. And then those guys came back for me and I tried to defend myself. His lips tucked downwards. And well, and then the police came. Tsukachi guessed. Right. They wanted me to put down my shield, but I couldn't. The boy's hold tightened around the shield, knuckles turning white as he brought it closer to his chest. All Might leaned forward, elbows resting against the bedside. So you used your quirk to defend yourself? It made sense. Tsukachi could already see the police report he would write up. A traumatized kidnapped teen who used his quirk out of self-defense and fear was a lot less terrifying than an unknown vigilante who tried to kill the number 2 hero theory that was being thrown about. He could work with that. Midoriya's shoulders rose to his ears, discomfort leaking from his entire body. He didn't want to answer. Tsukachi didn't blame him. Most people didn't like talking to someone who was the human equivalent of a lie detector. And then the boy answered with something Tsukachi was not prepared for. No. The response was soft, barely audible if he and All Might were not sitting so close to the teen. What? Was all Tsukachi remarked. I didn't use any quirk, sir, Midoriya confessed. I, don't have one. So you took down Endeavor and several police officers with just your shield? All Might asked, his tone matching Tsukachi in disbelief. He looked over to him for confirmation. The detective nodded. The boss didn't lie. It was all true. A quirkless child took down the number 2 hero. The media would have a field day if such information got out. Midoriya threw him a nervous smile, fingers drumming along the top of the very weapon that took down Endeavor. It's a very good shield. Tsukachi blinked rapidly, trying to reclaim some semblance of control. This was soon becoming one of the top 5 strangest cases he'd been brought into. You know, with the way you swung that thing around, I would have thought we were Captain Kamino, he joked, trying to lighten the strange tension that filled the room. Sadly, it did anything but. Midoriya seemed to crumple in on himself. He pinched his nose, hair covering his eyes as if he were actually thinking about. The world seemed to slow down around Tsukachi. No. He squinted, brows crossing as his instincts took hold. No, it could be. All Might notice the change immediately, resting a hand on the teen's small shoulder. Young Midoriya, are you feeling all right? Should I get the doctor? The teen squirmed beneath the man's hand, turning the same shade as his hair. Finally, he looked back at Tsukachi. vulnerability hidden behind a thin veneer of politeness. Um, you said you're required to report this, right? The red, green, and black colors on the boy's shield burned into his eyelids. Tsukachi looked to the symbol of peace, wondering if he was arriving at the now very possible, very unbelievable answer before them. Only if you used your quirk, but you didn't, Tsukachi stated, desperately trying to calm his frantic heart. So, technically, my capacity as a police officer need not apply here. All Might did call me here as a friend. Indeed, All Might pressed forward in a soft tone. Young Midoriya, is there something you would like to share with us? You look like you have something you want to say. His shoulders relaxed, if only slightly, at the news. I mean, this is the future, so it's not like I'm a fugitive anymore, right? The buzz inside his mind felt neither cold nor hot. An inconclusive statement, then. Tsukachi swallowed, trying to keep from blurting out the question that rose to the tip of his tongue. No, you are not a fugitive, young man, All Might assured, looking to Tsukachi for confirmation. The detective shrugged. While unprofessional, he really wasn't in his element anymore. Not with the bubbling truth just beneath the surface of their conversation. He had to know. He needed to ask. That's good. At least I don't have to worry about that anymore, Midora remarked softly. He couldn't contain it. You... Tsukachi hesitated, almost not believing the words that came out of his mouth. You're Captain Kamino? Tsukachi had seen a lot of things in his years as a detective. Unexplained murders, mysterious bank robberies, trigger busts, political sabotage, the works. His dealings with pro-heroes, and to a certain extent vigilantes, provided him an even greater access to the criminal underworld. Despite Japan's relatively low crime rate, there were still unexplainable crimes that needed solving. This was none of the above. His hands itched to grab onto something, anything to keep himself steady at the dawning realization. Midoriya, bless the boy's soul, had to look meek as he answered in a question-like tone, as if he were afraid of how they would react. Yes? And just like that, Tsukachi's world flipped upside down. His colleague wasn't much better. He had never seen such a look on the symbol of peace. I think I need to sit down, All Might stated faintly. You're already sitting, noted the detective in a similar tone. Tsukachi wanted to laugh. The progenitor of Japanese heroics was a 15-year-old boy. Forget Japan, the entire world would go insane if this information was brought to light. What was supposed to be a simple interview had turned into something far more in only the span of a few minutes. The truth really was stranger than fiction sometimes. One thing was for sure, however. He needed a drink.